The air in the grand amphitheater of St. Jude's Elite Pavilion was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and sterile arrogance. At the center of the mahogany stage, Dr. Sterling Vane adjusted his silk tie, his face radiating a warmth that never reached his predatory eyes. He looked at Leo, who stood by the side entrance holding a stack of patient grievance logs that would never be filed. "Leo, my boy," Vane began, his voice amplified to reach the billionaire donors in the front row. "I noticed you looked a bit frazzled during the Thompson Gala. It's a shame, really. When you represent this institution to our VVIPs, your personal exhaustion shouldn't be their burden. You must learn that in this tier of medicine, your feelings are entirely secondary to the client's comfort." Vane's smile widened as a murmur of agreement rippled through the gallery. He wasn't just criticizing Leo, he was performing a ritual of public erasure. Leo felt the weight of 3 consecutive nights spent on the phone with Miss Thompson, absorbing death threats and demands for illegal prescriptions. Vane had calmly promised over cocktails. "I'm sorry you find it difficult to maintain a professional facade under such light pressure." Vane continued, patting Leo on the shoulder with a grip that bruised. "But look at it as a learning opportunity. I'm only being firm because I want to see you grow beyond a mere messenger. You're struggling because you lack the refined skin of a true partner. It's for your own good that I point out how much you're failing our standards today." The status in the room shifted instantly. The board members who had once relied on Leo's midnight fixes now looked at him like a faulty piece of equipment. Vane leaned closer to the microphone. "And let's be honest, Leo, your tendency to overcomplicate things with resource complaints is just a mask for your own inefficiency. Why did you bother Director Holloway with claims of being short-handed? When I promised the Sultan's family a private nursing team for their routine checkup, I didn't expect my junior associate to whine about shift hours. It's about the mission, Leo. Try to keep up with the adults." Director Holloway, a man whose soul was replaced by a spreadsheet long ago, stood up from the front row. He adjusted his glasses, looking at a digital report on his tablet. "Vane is right," Holloway barked, his voice like dry leaves. "According to the engagement metrics Leo submitted last month, the client satisfaction is at a perfect 100%. If the scores are that high, it means the current workload is actually too low. Leo, based on the very data you managed, I've just signed the order to cut your support staff by half. If you can handle a sultan and a gala while looking frazzled, then clearly you have too much time on your hands. We're reallocating your 2 assistants to the surgical wing effective immediately." The audience let out a collective, mocking chuckle. Leo looked at the tablet in Holloway's hand, then at the smug, fatherly tilt of Vane's head. He was being punished for his own competence, for the thousands of hours he spent shielding these people from the reality of their own impossible promises. Vane leaned in for the kill, his voice a poisonous whisper. "Don't look so crestfallen, Leo. A smaller team will build your character. You should be thanking me for the challenge. Now, go fetch the Thompson file and try not to trip over your own incompetence on the way out. We have a real meeting to start." Leo didn't move. He felt the digital weight of the emotional labor folder in his cloud drive, the one containing the 4:00 a.m. WhatsApp rants from Vane, the illegal promises sent from Vane's private Gmail, and the recorded calls where Vane explicitly told Leo to make the contract disappear, so the client wouldn't see the extra fees. He looked at Holloway's signature on the staff cut order. The first crack appeared in Leo's interface mask. "Of course, Vane," Leo said, his voice devoid of its usual soothing cadence. "If the director believes the metrics are that stable, I suppose I don't need to filter the Thompson family's calls anymore. In fact, I'll stop the translation service entirely. Let's see how the mission looks in raw data." Leo walked out of the amphitheater, but he didn't head to the Thompson file room. Instead, he sat at his desk in the open plan lobby, a glass cage where every VIP could see him, and performed a single surgical strike on his laptop. He deactivated the interface filter script he'd written, a private AI tool that took the screaming, profanity-laced emails from billionaire patients and turned them into urgent requests for clarification. He also disabled his private call forwarding service. For 3 years, Leo had been the buffer, the man who stayed awake at 3 a.m. to tell a drunken oil tycoon that Dr. Vane was reviewing the charts, when Vane was actually passed out in a penthouse. Now the calls would go exactly where the contract said they should, directly to the senior partner's private encrypted line. Less than 20 minutes later, the first vibration shook the air. Not Leo's phone, but the heavy, gold-plated device in Dr. Vane's pocket as he stood in the hallway, still basking in the compliments of a donor. Vane frowned, pulling the phone out. It was Thompson. Not the calm Thompson Leo usually presented, but the raw, unhinged version. Vane laughed nervously, gesturing to the donor. "Pardon me, just a minor follow-up from a grateful patient," he answered with his signature velvet tone. "Mr. Thompson, so good too." He didn't finish. Even from 5 feet away, the sound of Thompson's screaming was audible. A high-pitched rasp of, "Where is my illegal sedative? And you promised me the entire floor would be cleared." Vane's face went from pale to a blotchy, sickly red. He looked at Leo, who was calmly typing a grocery list. "Leo!" Vane hissed, covering the mouthpiece and scurrying over like a panicked rat. "Why is Thompson calling my personal line? And why is he speaking like this? Handle this immediately. You know how important his donation is for the new wing. I'm trying to teach you how to manage high-level expectations, but you're making it very difficult when you let these calls through." Vane's attempt to maintain the teacher persona was fraying at the edges. His hand was shaking. Leo didn't even look up. "Vane, as Director Holloway pointed out, my staff has been cut. I no longer have the inefficient hours required to pre-screen your personal commitments. I'm simply following your advice, giving you the direct engagement a true partner deserves. Isn't this a great learning opportunity for us both?" The status in the lobby shifted as a group of junior nurses paused to watch. Vane, the man who always had an answer, was currently being verbally eviscerated by a speakerphone he couldn't figure out how to mute. "Listen to me, you ungrateful," Vane started, but his phone chirped again, a second line. It was the Sultan's brother, then a third. The SLA exemption emails Leo had stopped filtering were now flooding Vane's inbox, triggering high-priority alerts on his smartwatch. Vane's wrist was buzzing so hard it looked like he was having a seizure. He was no longer the calm mentor, he was a man drowning in his own lies. "I'm disappointed in your attitude, Leo," Vane stammered, his voice cracking. "A professional doesn't just stop. I'm only being hard on you because the hospital needs a unified front. Now take this phone and fix it." Leo stood up slowly, leaning in so only Vane could hear. "I can't take the phone, Sterling. That would be overcomplicating things. Remember, my job is just to be the interface. And right now the interface is reporting that the client is calling you a fraudulent hack who couldn't find a vein in a blood bank." Those are his words, not mine. "I'd love to help, but I have to go file that Thompson report you asked for. It might take me 4 or 5 hours. As Leo walked away, Director Holloway marched into the lobby, his face a mask of cold fury. He wasn't looking at Leo, he was looking at his tablet, which was now flashing red with service-level violation alerts. The perfect 100% satisfaction score he had boasted about 10 minutes ago was plummeting in real time as VIPs began posting public complaints about Vane's unkept promises. "Vane!" Holloway roared, ignoring the donors. "Why am I getting a notification that the Thompson family is withdrawing their $5 million endowment? And why is the Sultan's legal team in the parking lot?" Vane spun around, his fatherly smile now a grotesque grimace of terror. "Director, it's a temporary misunderstanding. Leo here was supposed to..." Holloway cut him off with a bark of laughter. "Leo? I just signed the order saying Leo was underworked. Are you telling me this entire multi-million-dollar operation was being held together by a junior associate you just told me was incompetent? If the system collapses the moment he stops whining, then either he's a genius or you're a liar. Which is it, Sterling?" Vane looked between the angry director and the blank-faced Leo. He tried to retreat into his shell of superiority. "Now, Director, let's be mature about this. I was merely trying to provide Leo with some constructive discipline. It's for his own growth." Holloway stepped into Vane's personal space, stabbing a finger at the surgeon's chest. Your discipline just cost us the Thompson wing. The board is already calling an emergency session. You're not teaching anyone anything, Vane. You're defensive because you've been caught with your hand in the resource jar. Get into my office, now. Vane's status had vanished. He wasn't the master of the hospital anymore. He was a defendant. He looked back at Leo, his eyes pleading for a translation, a fix, a lie, anything to stop the bleeding. Leo simply adjusted his tie and offered a polite, hollow smile. The emergency board meeting wasn't held behind closed doors. In St. Jude's Transparency Initiative, the walls of the executive conference room were literal floor-to-ceiling glass, and the audio was being broadcast to the medical staff's internal tablets for educational purposes. Sterling Vane sat at the head of the table, sweating through his $3,000 suit. Opposite him, Director Holloway was vibrating with a cold, calculated rage. Leo stood at the back of the room, ostensibly there to take notes, but in reality, he was the executioner waiting for the drop. Sterling, Holloway began, his voice a low growl. The Thompson family isn't just withdrawing their donation, they've filed a formal lawsuit for medical fraud. They claim you personally signed a non-disclosure agreement, promising them a black market kidney priority list. Tell me right now that they are hallucinating. Vane's eyes darted to Leo, a flash of pure desperate venom. He tried to reclaim his teaching voice, but it came out as a pathetic, high-pitched warble. Now, Director, let's not be hasty. As I've always tried to teach Leo, in high-stakes medicine, we sometimes have to manage unconventional expectations. It's about the holistic care of the donor's psyche. I was simply mentoring Leo on how to handle difficult personalities by Leo interrupted, his voice cutting through Vane's rambling like a scalpel. Actually, Dr. Vane, I have the mentorship logs right here. Since you mentioned it was for my growth, I made sure to save every single one of your instructional emails sent from your unencrypted private server. Leo tapped a key on his tablet and the massive 8K monitors in the room flickered to life. The first document wasn't an email, it was a spreadsheet titled Shadow Commitments Vane Thompson. It listed every illegal promise, every bypassed protocol, and every convenience fee Vane had pocketed while telling Leo to fix the paperwork. The room went deathly silent. Vane's jaw dropped, his smugness replaced by a gray, ashen mask of terror. This is a fabrication, Vane shrieked, slamming his hands on the table. Leo is a disgruntled low-level clerk. He's bitter because I gave him some tough love about his performance. Holloway, you saw the reports, he's incompetent. Leo didn't blink. If I'm incompetent, Sterling, then why did you send me this at 2:14 a.m. last Tuesday? Leo swiped the screen. A voice recording began to play over the high-fidelity speakers. It was Vane's voice, slurred and arrogant. Leo, you little rat, I don't care if the Sultan's brother isn't on the surgical schedule. Move the orphan kid's appendectomy to the hallway. If the Sultan is happy, I get my kickback, and you get to keep your pathetic job. Consider this a lesson in strategic prioritization. Don't bother Holloway, he's too busy counting pennies to understand how real power works. The board members gasped. Holloway's face turned a shade of purple that looked medically dangerous. Vane was no longer panicked, he was desperate. He lunged across the table toward Leo, but the security guards who had also been listening to the broadcast stepped into the frame. And as for the resource efficiency report that led to the staff cuts, Leo continued, his tone as cold as a morgue slab, I have the Protocol B logs. Dr. Vane instructed me to create a false data layer for Director Holloway. He wanted the numbers to look perfect so he could claim a performance bonus for reduced overhead, while I was secretly paying the nursing staff out of a private emergency fund, just to keep the patients from dying of neglect. Leo turned his gaze to Holloway. Director, you signed the staff cut order based on a lie Sterling told you to line his own pockets. You weren't managing efficiency, you were managing a crime scene, and I have the signed efficiency approval document, where Sterling explicitly stated that Leo's team is redundant because the automation is flawless. The automation director was me. It was me working 20-hour shifts to hide his malpractice. Vane was hyperventilating now, his silk tie loosened and hanging like a noose. I was helping you, he screamed. The Protocol C, hypocritical teaching finally shattering into raw, ugly aggression. I was giving you a career. You would be nothing without my shadow. I taught you how the world works. You're supposed to be my shield, you ungrateful little parasite. Leo stepped forward, looking Vane directly in the eyes. A shield only works if there's something worth protecting, Sterling. But you're just a parasite who mistook a host's patience for weakness. You told me I needed thicker skin. Well, it turns out my skin is thick enough to survive your downfall. But yours? Yours is transparent. Holloway stood up, his hand trembling as he pointed at the exit. Sterling Vane, you are stripped of your Herquadin status, effective immediately. Security, escort him to his office to collect his personal items, if they aren't already evidence, and call the police. I want a full forensic audit of every teaching moment this man has ever had. Vane tried to speak, to offer one last fatherly excuse, but his voice failed him. He was humiliated, a broken man in an expensive suit, being led away in front of the entire hospital staff who were watching the screens with jubilant intensity. But Leo wasn't done. He turned his tablet toward Holloway. And now, Director, let's talk about your operational excellence signatures. Because if I'm redundant, I assume my severance package, which I've already drafted according to the service level violation penalties in my contract, will be processed by the end of the hour. Director Holloway didn't move. He stared at the severance package document on Leo's tablet, his eyes scanning the numbers that represented not just a payout but a ransom. This is extortion, Holloway whispered, his voice cracking as he realized his precious efficiency metrics were actually the blueprint for a criminal investigation. Leo didn't look away. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over Holloway's expensive desk. No, Director. Extortion is when you force someone to work 20 hours a day to cover up a surgeon's felonies while you collect a cost-saving bonus. This is just an adjustment to the SLA. I'm simply charging you for the emotional labor of not calling the Federal Medical Board 5 minutes ago. Your signature, Director, now, before I decide that the severance should also include your company car and your seat on the board. Holloway looked at the glass walls. He saw the nurses, the cleaners, and the interns, the people he had treated as rounding errors, all holding their tablets, watching the live feed of his disgrace. He realized that if he didn't sign, the next broadcast would be his own deposition. His hand shook so violently that the digital signature looked like a jagged scar across the screen. There, Holloway spat, his face a mask of humiliated defeat. It's done. Take your money and get out. You're a parasite, Leo. You're just like Vane. Leo smiled, but it was a cold, sharp thing that didn't reach his eyes. The difference, Holloway, is that I'm a parasite that knows how to survive the death of the host. You and Vane, you're just the meal. Leo turned his back on the director, walking through the glass doors as the board members began to scream at Holloway about damage control. Leo didn't go to the exit. He went to Vane's corner office, where the disgraced surgeon was frantically stuffing a leather briefcase with confidential files and bottles of high-end scotch. Vane looked up, his hair disheveled, the fatherly mentor persona replaced by the frantic energy of a cornered animal. You! Vane roared, pointing a trembling finger. You think you've won? I have connections, Leo. I have patients who owe me their lives. I'll have you blacklisted from every hospital on the continent. You're nothing without the interface. You're a low-level clerk who got lucky. Leo leaned against the doorframe, checking his watch. Actually, Sterling, I'm the man who just sent your connections the unedited audio of you calling them bloated ATM machines with failing organs. I sent it 10 minutes ago. I'd check your phone, but I suspect it's currently vibrating itself off the desk with death threats. Vane froze. He lunged for his phone, his face turning a ghostly, translucent white as he saw the hundreds of missed calls from the city's most powerful and dangerous men. His god complex didn't just crack, it pulverized into dust. You destroyed me. Vane whimpered, his voice dropping into the silenced stage of his trajectory. Why? I gave you everything. I taught you how to navigate this world. Leo walked over to the desk, picked up one of Vane's expensive crystal paperweights and let it drop. It shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces on the marble floor. You didn't teach me how to navigate the world, Sterling. You taught me how to identify a fraud, and as for why, it's because for 3 years you made me translate your ugly into professional. I'm just tired of the translation. I wanted everyone to see the original text. The security guards arrived then, their hands heavy on Vane's shoulders. They didn't treat him with the doctor deference anymore. They handled him like a common shoplifter. As they dragged him toward the service elevator, the one used for medical waste and corpses, Vane tried to muster one last scrap of his old authority. He stopped at the threshold, looking back at Leo with eyes full of a pathetic, desperate longing for a final word. Leo, please, tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I was trying to help you. One last lesson, boy, please. Vane's voice was a ragged plea, the sound of a man who had finally realized he was the one who was transparent. Leo stood in the center of the office, surrounded by the wreckage of Vane's vanity. He didn't offer a lesson, he didn't offer a reflection. He just looked at Vane's blotchy, weeping face and the way his expensive suit was bunched up under the guard's grip. The lesson is over, Sterling, Leo said, his voice a flat, emotionless blade. And you failed the final exam. Don't worry about the misunderstanding. I've already sent the board the corrected version. In that version, you aren't a mentor. And you aren't a surgeon. You're just the man who's about to find out what happens when the interface finally stops caring if you live or die. Leo turned the lights off, leaving Vane in the dim, cold glow of the hallway, a silenced shadow being dragged toward a basement he would never leave. Vane opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. His face was a contorted mask of pure, unadulterated humiliation, his eyes locked on the closed door of the office that was no longer his. He was a non-entity, a ghost in a sterile hall, finally and utterly silenced by the very man he thought he had erased. Leo walked toward the main entrance, the notification on his phone confirming the multi-million-dollar wire transfer from Holloway's emergency account. He didn't look back at the hospital, he didn't look back at the wreckage. He just walked into the sunlight, leaving the elite pavilion to burn in the fire of its own arrogance.
Watching Sterling Vane get dragged out through the service elevator, the same path as the medical waste, he treated everyone like was easily the most satisfying crash and burn I've witnessed in a long time. It's funny how the loudest menors are always the first to lose their voices when the record finally speaks for itself. If you held the keys to the director's career like Leo did, would you have taken the multi-million-dollar exit or stay to burn the entire pavilion down? Between us, I almost let Vane keep his medical license, but his protocol C gaslighting was just too insufferable to spare.